You are lying in a sterile, brightly lit hospital room. You are surrounded by highly trained medical professionals, advanced fetal heart monitors, IV drips, and modern pain relief. If something goes wrong, an emergency surgical team is standing by just down the hall. Giving birth today is still a monumental physical challenge, a grueling marathon that tests the limits of the human body. But for 99% of human history, bringing new life into the world was the ultimate evolutionary gamble. There were no hospitals, there were no epidurals, there was no sanitized environment. There was only the harsh wilderness, immense, unmedicated pain, and a unique biological paradox that made human birth the most dangerous and agonizing among all mammals. If you were suddenly transported back to the Paleolithic era, stripped of modern medicine and left to face the elements, how would you actually survive the process of giving birth? The answer lies in a fascinating mixture of evolutionary compromises, profound social bonds, and raw human endurance. To understand exactly how dangerous giving birth was for your ancient ancestors, you first have to understand the concept that anthropologists call the obstetrical dilemma. Millions of years ago, the ancestors of modern humans made a critical evolutionary trade-off that changed the trajectory of our species forever. First, they stood up. Walking upright on two legs, known as bipedalism, was a massive advantage for crossing the prehistoric African savanna. It freed our hands to carry food, craft tools, and hold weapons. It allowed us to see over tall grasses and travel long distances efficiently. But bipedalism came with a severe anatomical cost. To walk upright efficiently, without falling over, the female pelvis had to undergo a radical redesign. It became shorter, wider, and significantly narrower at the birth canal. It also twisted into a complex bow-like shape to support the internal organs against the new downward force of gravity. Then, hundreds of thousands of years later, a second massive evolutionary shift occurred. Human brains rapidly expanded. As early humans began mastering fire, cooking meat, and developing complex languages, our craniums exploded in size. Evolution suddenly demanded that a baby with a massive, highly complex brain fit through the narrow, twisted, newly redesigned bipedal pelvis. It was a complete anatomical nightmare. Nature was pitting the size of the human brain directly against the mechanics of human walking. To solve this impossible problem, evolution was forced to make a drastic, terrifying compromise. Human babies have to be born significantly earlier in their developmental cycle than other primates. Think about the rest of the animal kingdom. A newborn foal can stand up on shaky legs and run with the herd within mere hours of birth. A baby chimpanzee is strong enough to instantly cling to its mother's fur as she swings through the trees. But a human infant is born completely helpless. It is blind, weak, highly underdeveloped, and essentially a fetus on the outside for its first 3 to 4 months of life. Anthropologists often refer to this period as the fourth trimester. But even with this dramatic evolutionary shortcut, evicting the baby before its brain gets too large, the fit is incredibly tight. In fact, it is almost a mathematical impossibility. A human baby's head is completely malleable, featuring soft spots called fontanelles that allow the skull plates to physically squish and overlap each other just to squeeze through the bone structure of the mother. Furthermore, the human birth canal is not a straight tube. The entrance is widest from side to side, but the exit is widest from front to back. This means that during a human birth, the baby actually has to perform a complex corkscrew-like rotation while traveling through the mother's pelvis just to fit. Because of this complex rotation, humans are the only primates where the baby almost always emerges facing away from the mother. This might sound like a minor detail, but in the wild, it is a deadly complication. If a prehistoric human mother tried to reach down and pull the baby out herself during a difficult labor, she risked bending the infant's neck backward against its natural curve, potentially snapping its fragile spine. A chimpanzee mother can easily catch her own baby as it drops. A prehistoric human mother could not. She faced a terrifying, undeniable reality. She could not do this alone. This single biological limitation created one of the most profound behavioral shifts in the history of our species. It created the midwife. Paleoanthropologists call this concept obligate midwifery. To survive the harrowing ordeal of giving birth in the Stone Age, human mothers had to rely on the social intelligence and deep empathy of their tribe. Other women in the group, usually older mothers, aunts, or grandmothers who had survived the ordeal themselves, stepped in to help. They guided the baby out safely. They rapidly cleared the infant's airway of mucus. They untangled the umbilical cord to prevent suffocation. The very act of human childbirth forced our ancestors to cooperate, to communicate, and to build deep emotional bonds that transcended basic animal survival. It is widely believed that this necessity for birth assistance helped forge the complex social structures that define humanity today. The grandmother hypothesis suggests that older females who could no longer have children themselves became the absolute backbone of human survival, acting as expert midwives and guardians of collective medical knowledge. Your existence today is the direct result of hundreds of thousands of years of ancient women helping each other survive in the dark. But what did the actual physical process of an ancient birth look like? Without a sterile hospital bed, how did an ancient woman position herself? For starters, she absolutely did not lie flat on her back. Lying on the back, known as the lithotomy position, is a relatively modern medical invention designed for the convenience of the doctor, not the mother. Lying down forces the mother to push the baby uphill, fighting directly against the powerful force of gravity. It also compresses the blood vessels in her back and locks the tailbone in place, essentially shrinking the size of the pelvic opening. Instead, ancient women used the raw forces of nature to their advantage. They squatted. They kneeled on all fours. They hung their body weight from the low, sturdy branches of trees, or they clung to thick vines. Sometimes, a companion would sit behind the mother, allowing her to lean back into a deeply supported squat. Archaeological evidence, ranging from ancient fertility figurines to the observed practices of indigenous hunter-gatherer tribes in the modern era, shows that upright birthing was a universal human instinct. By squatting, gravity naturally pulled the baby downward, and the flexible joints of the pelvis could physically expand up to 30% wider to accommodate the infant's head. Once the baby was finally delivered, there was no sterile surgical scalpel waiting to cut the umbilical cord. Ancient midwives used what the earth provided. They used razor-sharp shards of knapped flint, chipped obsidian blades, or the sharp edges of broken seashells. In some ancient cultures, the mother or the midwife simply chewed through the tough, rubbery, vein-filled cord with their teeth. But even after the cord was cut, the danger was far from over. They were sitting in the open, raw wilderness, surrounded by the powerful, undeniable scent of blood. to a roaming pack of prehistoric dire wolves, a massive short-faced bear, or a saber-toothed cat. A birth was not a beautiful miracle. It was a dinner bell. The ancient mothers had to act quickly, quietly, and efficiently. The placenta, the massive organ that sustained the baby, and any blood-soaked earth were immediately scooped up and buried deep in the ground, or they were thrown into a rushing river. They had to completely erase the scent of their vulnerability before apex predators could track them down. And what about the agonizing pain? Today, mothers have access to highly advanced epidural anesthesia that completely numbs the lower half of the body. In the deep past, pain relief was entirely botanical and deeply psychological. Ancient humans were not primitive in their minds. They possessed an encyclopedic, highly sophisticated knowledge of their local environments and plant life. Anthropologists and ethnobotanists believe that ancient midwives provided the laboring mother with specific roots and barks to chew on. For example, chewing on white willow bark provides a natural dose of salicin, the exact same active chemical ingredient found in modern synthetic aspirin. They brewed strong, earthy teas from local herbs like raspberry leaf to help induce steady contractions, or they applied specific mosses to stop heavy postpartum bleeding. But their most powerful painkiller was not a plant at all. It was psychological. They used rhythmic, repetitive chanting, intense focused breathing, and the firm, supportive physical touch of the women surrounding them. It is a proven medical fact today that continuous physical support during labor drastically reduces the need for pain medication. By gripping the hands of her sisters, matching their breathing, and listening to their songs, the ancient mother entered a deep, trance-like psychological state. This supportive environment triggered a massive release of oxytocin and natural endorphins in her brain, the body's own powerful painkillers, helping her manage the agonizing, rolling waves of labor. Despite these remarkable, highly evolved survival strategies, the mortality rate of the ancient world was incredibly brutal. Bioarchaeologists studying prehistoric burial sites frequently uncover a heartbreaking reality. They find the tragic, fossilized remains of young women buried with the tiny, fragile skeletons of full-term infants resting permanently in their pelvic regions. Mothers who died in the middle of labor, unable to overcome the obstetrical dilemma. Estimates suggest that in the ancient hunter-gatherer world, a staggering 1 in 100 births resulted in the death of the mother, and infant mortality in the first year of life was unimaginably high. Earning the title of mother in the Paleolithic era was not just a rite of passage. It meant surviving the absolute deadliest physical trial a human being could ever face. Yet, despite the terror, the pain, and the overwhelming odds, they did survive. Generation after generation, in freezing ice age caves, on scorching drought-stricken savannas, and deep inside the shadows of ancient, untamed forests. They fought through the unimaginable pain. They relied heavily on the unwavering strength of their sisters, and they brought humanity forward, inch by inch, one fragile life at a time. The next time you hear a baby cry, do not just hear the sound of new life. Listen closer. Hear the echo of 300,000 years of fierce, relentless, unbreakable human survival. You are the direct descendant of the ultimate survivors. You are only here today because, in the face of impossible odds, the women of the ancient world did not give up.